Welcome to DeepTech315. I'm Gene Munster along with Doug Clinton. Our three topics today are OpenAI's DevDay, second Elon Musk's X.AI company and their Grok model. And last, we're going to talk about Humane in an AI device, AI pin device. And so we'll take it back to the top, the beginning of the week. I'm still reverberating from this 45-minute prezo that Sam Altman did at OpenAI's DevDay, and I was just mesmerized by it. As you're watching, Doug, what were you thinking?
Felt a little bit like an Apple presentation, I think intentionally. I mean, Apple, it's funny, I guess, to say, but like they've set the standard for what a tech sort of demo day should look like. And I think OpenAI is kind of carrying that mantle forward in terms of being super innovative. I mean, I think they're the most exciting company right now in tech, and it's probably obvious to say it. But the demo day really proved that with GPT, with the store that's coming. I think that there's a lot to be excited in AI.
So yeah, from the GPT piece, so the two big announcements outside of just how exciting what they're doing around generative AI and just seeing the products in motion, that outside of that piece, the two big announcements were GPT Builder, which is going to make it easier for, I'll say, non-technical people. You're probably still kind of developer-ish, don't you think, to put these together? And just I can try to give an explanation of it is you would go into their platform. This is GPT Builder. If you want to train it, the example that he gave was to give founders advice on a startup. And so he just went in, selected, I think like a TED Talk or something like that that he did, and trained the model off of that, and then turned it on, and away they went. And so it was pretty powerful. It looked pretty easy to do. Do you think it's as easy as it looks?
I think it'll be pretty easy. I mean, the way I think about it is you have, GPT-4 Turbo. I mean, that's the most current model as of demo day. That is your general intelligence right now. Now, I'm not saying it's AGI, not artificial general intelligence, but it has this general understanding of the world that is your starting point. And then I kind of see the purpose of GPT Builder as a tool to basically let people go and take that general intelligence and specialize it for something that they think would be really interesting. So you gave the example of Sam Altman kind of teaching it up on some of his prior talks about startup, business, how to create velocity in startups, how to run a startup. That's a perfect example of a specialized, GPT that we'll see out there. I think you could see thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of these GPTs over time that are trained with very specific use cases and have these sort of narrow applications, very
Mm-hmm.
specific use applications that people will monetize.
But for me, as I'm watching the demo, I'm thinking, is this as easy as it looks? And you said you think it is, but is that the right perspective? Do I got the right
I
perspective here?
think think it will be. I mean, I've spent a lot of time using ChatGPT, Claude, Bard. I've experimented with all of them, and I've created a lot of these stock index products, active strategies using just AI built on
The
generative
performance is
AI.
pretty good, by the way.
For many of them, it is, yeah, and that has been relatively easy. So the way I think about it is, you need to go in and you need to have some knowledge about how to create an effective prompt for AI. So there is some learning curve. I think it's a pretty easy thing to kind of get high on really quick. So I don't think that's going to be a big barrier for people. People who really want to do it, who really want to learn, will be able to
For
go.
sure.
And it's nothing like trying to learn to code. It's a
Hmm.
way easier learning code curve than that.
Yeah, I was just thinking like this. Well, all this great stuff we've heard around customer support and some of the improvements that we've had about adding these generative experiences, like that's still been more technical in nature, and developers and bigger companies have been doing that. Now I feel like the doors are kind of opening up for a much bigger audience that can roll out these models. And so that leads to their second announcement, which was the store. And they kind of think about this as like an app store for generative AI. And as a reminder, apps are not just on your phone, apps are on computer, apps are kind of everywhere. You can have an app on TV. And so that really, I had to kind of have a flashback back to when Apple announced its App Store in 2008. Like it really changed the phone from being a device, an internet device and a phone to a computer in your pocket. That was a huge unlock. And so in the
Yeah.
back of my mind, I'm thinking, is this as big of an unlock as the App Store was for
I think
Apple?
it opens up the technology to the wider creativity of humanity. I mean, that's fundamentally what the App Store did was it took all the great ideas that Apple had and it said, okay, let's take this technology and put it in the hands of developers and see what they make. And now we have millions of apps and things like Uber came out of that, things like Airbnb. I mean, you could argue some of these platforms maybe wouldn't even exist
For
if we
sure they
didn't
went
have
to.
an app store. And I think you're going to see the same exact thing here, with an even wider potential set of people that are creating these applications. And so if you rewind back to 2008, you say, man, like the App Store was so obvious. I wish I knew how to code and create apps back then. Now you're going to have another chance to sort of do the same thing. Just got to figure out how to prompt these AIs well.
Yeah, and I also was thinking in the back of my mind, like, what does Apple think of this ultimately? And got me thinking about Apple or OpenAI eventually doing a phone, and then we were talking about this after too, like, and you're like, don't just stop at the phone. Kind of remind us where you were going with this.
Well, yeah, I think it's everything. I mean, AI could touch anything that has a connection right now, which our door locks have connections, our toasters have connections, our ovens have internet connections. So anything that's connected right now, you could reimagine in a new way with AI, which we're going to talk a little bit about the Humane pin a little later. But I don't think it's just about a phone. I mean, the phone is the thing we kind of live and experience a lot of the connected world through. But the idea of an AI interface instead of a touchscreen interface is something that I think we could see kind of pervade throughout connected devices, not just phones.
Hmm. We're kind of in our research meeting, we were kicking around the idea of what would happen if you're having all this economic value essentially that's getting pulled into OpenAI's store, and they're going to divide that, for example, build something where a customer service person would be distributed through an app, and then some of that value is going to be kept by OpenAI, and some of it's going to be distributed back um, to the developer, to the company. And I was just thinking, what if Apple could pull that back, that same stuff? And this is going to be for another week, but Apple is just, they got to be moving on this behind the scenes, because if they don't, they're missing a huge opportunity. So, in the interest of time, we're going to shift to the second big topic, which was related to Elon's company and Grok, their new model. I'm going to give a quick setup of where that name comes from, Doug, and you can just kind of give everybody a one-on-one on what the product is. The name is inspired by a book, A Stranger in a Strange Land, which was written like 1960. One of the characters in the book came from Mars, half Martian, half human, but the one of the words in his language was Grok, that kind of withstood the test of time as he came to Earth, and that word happened to be meaning like a great meaning. And so would if you want to give some context into what's the product actually like? What are they doing here with Grok?
Grok is X.AI's foundational model. And what's different, I would say, about it versus, an OpenAI or a Bard is it is incorporating some of the data from Twitter, X now, to train the model. And I think that's really important because if you think about, what's happening on the internet and really like real time nature, Twitter is that platform. And so there may be some advantage you could argue for Grok that they have more real time understanding of like what is happening right now in the world than maybe any other AI platform out there. That's the advantage I think that they should push. Now, I think there's probably some other question of, what other of these models are pulling in Twitter data? How are they accessing it? I know that that's been an issue all year. Facebook, Meta talked a little bit about threads, I think, and some of their data being pulled into
Wait,
these models. And I
wait,
think
wait.
that's
I
going to
want
be
to
a more sensitive
before we
issue.
get into the data point and the
Hmm.
advantage that X Twitter has there. It feels like it's they're positioning this as interaction with uh, like a a disrespectful chatbot, and it's supposed to be funny, but I'm still struggling with their starting point. Should I just ignore their starting point and think, yes, it's starting with this chat bot that happens to say crazy things,
I
and just look at the
think
bigger
that
picture?
yeah, I think the starting point is it's a little bit of like Elon's persona imbued in a chatbot. I think
Exactly.
Elon's a little bit devilish and it's a little bit more cheeky and more fun, you could argue, than OpenAI, which is more specific,
But
direct.
is this like a Trojan horse where you start just kind of interacting it, but ultimately, is there a much bigger opportunity, or is Elon just trying to entertain people with this?
I think there's a bigger opportunity. I think he's trying to create something that's different. If you go and you chat with Bard, Claude, and OpenAI, you're going to have a fairly similar experience. You're going to have an experience where it feels like you're talking to a staid, normal personalityless human. I mean, that's basically how these things are programmed. They're not programmed to have a bunch of personality. You can give them a personality through prompting and have fun with it that way. But at a base level, going back to kind of the beginning of the conversation, kind of that general intelligence is just meant to answer your questions and deliver on your prompts.
But
I
is,
think
is the
what
idea is the idea that Elon wants us to start to interact with Grok because it's fun, it's different, and then ultimately build in some more substance to it? I mean, are we going to be doing? Is there going to be like a Microsoft Copilot element to this where it's going to be probably not be crafting my emails, but I mean, if they want to kind of have that same vision, because reading Elon's book feels like he's going. The Isaacson kind of framed it up that he's going right after OpenAI. It doesn't feel quite like that with Grok.
I think that would be a misread. I think that the personality element of it is something that's meant to be fun. I don't think Elon, I mean, look at some of the other things he does
Well,
with
it's
his
it's
other
a misread
products.
that this product isn't going anywhere, but Elon
It's a
does want to
misread
go
to think
after
it's not
OpenAI.
serious. Yeah, it's a misread to think it's just this
Okay,
like toy.
okay,
I
but
think the personality is meant, I think, to again set aside Grok from some of these other things and say like you can interact with a computer and it can still be fun right out of the box. Just like taking, I think the sound on a Tesla goes to 11. Like no car manufacturer does that. It's an inside joke. That's what he does.
right. Let's end the topic of this question. Do you think Elon wants to eat OpenAI's lunch?
I think that Elon is so ambitious, he wants to eat everybody's lunch and everything he does. So yeah, I'm sure he wants to compete with them.
Love it. Checking the clock. We've got 2 minutes here. Humane. This is this pin ex Apple people put together. You wear it. It's an AI pin. It's going to go on sale for what was it, $650?
699.
$699, and then you got to pay like $25 a month for. You can do like phone calls and things for it. It's got this kind of clever hologram, even though there's not a screen on it. You can use your hand, and it will kind of superimpose some of the controls on there. Reminds me of the Shuffle when it came out. I thought Apple would never do a screenless iPod, and in fact they did, but it didn't last very long. And it just feels like this is kind of fun that we're experimenting with this, but my sense is that it has a place, but doesn't really capture. It's not going to replace the phone.
Don't think it will. I think it will be a fun thing to see in terms of how people try to fit AI into a device and
Hmm.
make it AI first and not screen first, because we've never seen that before. We've never really seen that. And so I think what we could see is the pin could inspire some other companies, maybe like Apple, more likely maybe even like OpenAI,
Hmm. It's
to
back to
think
the
about
rumor
how
with
they could make devices.
Johnny Ive and that whole rumor piece to it, which, by the way, I understand Sam Altman's an investor in Humane too, which kind of the plot thickens around that. We're quickly running out of time here too, but does how does it work since it's voice driven? There's some gesture based, but does it work when you're in public or in a group of people? It feels like that's kind of a pretty big headwind to this product.
I think it's the same headwind as if you were trying to use Siri in a group of people or in public. I think it's basically the same.
Yeah,
So we'll see is the answer
I
is
see. Yeah, I
ultimately
guess you
their
do.
technology has to be as good as Apple's,
People,
but
yeah, they call Siri out in public all the time. So,
sure.
like you said, we'll see. We'll be getting one. Be fun. It'll be one of our topics for another deep tech. On behalf of Doug, Gene, and DeepTech315, that's a wrap. Bye for now.